Have you ever wondered what really makes people change their minds, or what it can take to shift our own beliefs? Whether it's rethinking personal values, tackling entrenched views, or breaking free from unhelpful patterns, our beliefs hold so much more power over us than we might realise. Today we are taking a deep dive into the science and psychology of belief change. We're going to explore some of the surprising findings, like how the placebo effect demonstrates the power of expectation, or why some people might feel better taking a placebo even when they know it is a placebo. And we're going to tackle some of the tough questions. So, are certain beliefs harder to change than others? Can listening and empathy really make a difference in shifting perspectives? And how can we actively reshape beliefs that are holding us back? So, backed by research on the impact of beliefs on everything from mental health to physical performance, and with tools like motivational interviewing and storytelling, we're going to unlock some of what it takes to influence beliefs, both in ourselves and with others. So let's get ready for a journey into the hidden mechanics of our minds and the insights to adopt healthier, more empowering beliefs, because changing our minds might just be the key to unlocking our potential.
So, Amy, tell us all, what kind of questions do people ask you when it comes to this particular topic, and why is it actually important?
So, it is a hugely important and exciting topic. And some of the questions, I think, for those people that are already switched on to this being super important, are around, well, how do I change beliefs? How do I change other people's minds? That's often a strong question. Are some of the beliefs or mind frames harder to change than others? And how can I adopt the most helpful beliefs for myself? And the reason that I think it's such an important area, it can be fluffy, but the science, when you look at placebo responses, so nocebo and placebo, the impacts on physical health, on mental health, on sports and performance, I think there is bucket loads of really fascinating experiments and research that comes out from these different fields that show us just how impactful it can be. And we haven't got time to unpack it all in this session because I've got a lot of questions for you, but we put it all into our Spark sheets, so our Synaptic Spark sheets that unpack some of this research in more depth, so that you can mull it over. But Jess, you work with people repeatedly for whom what they believe could be having an impact on their physical health and their mental health. And I imagine they come to you with certain beliefs, and you might not know what those beliefs are when they show up. But what are some of the things that you're seeing in this space of beliefs impacting us? What do you see?
Yeah, no, you're right, Amy. Sometimes it's not clear what their underlying beliefs are, and it can take several consultations until both I'm aligned with my patient and I are aligned. So that kind of incremental, gradual exposure to one another. But there are so many beliefs that I I think I sometimes have found it difficult to obviously relate to those beliefs because I'm very scientific and I'm very kind of factual and evidence based. And a lot of beliefs, they're not necessarily going to be based on anything, any hard evidence as such. And sometimes it's also just what people are exposed to, which, unless you know somebody really well, you're never going to know. So in my job, I might not know the patient very well, or I may know them very well, but just to give you an example, drugs and side effects. I do have people come to me and say, you know, I hear what you're saying about that particular drug. So statins, for example, which help lower cholesterol. I hear what you're saying. I hear all the evidence, but I had a friend, and when they took this drug, it gave them all these horrible side effects. And I'm just not keen. And you can already see, the fact that they've got this exposure to somebody else's experience, they're already creating side effects in a way that they may not
Yep.
even have because, they've heard their friends have gone through that. So that kind of societal influence, that influence from others, is so powerful. And it's really important to then explore that and talk more about that.
I completely agree. I've read papers specifically on statins, obviously, because we know that they save so many lives. It's really important that we try and get them into the people who can benefit from them. But they have shown that if you have drawn attention to side effects, even from the the little leaflet that goes into all of the drug packs. I don't know what you call it. Is it the warning card? No, the information leaflet.
Information
That.
leaflet,
Uh,
yeah.
yeah, that has a profound impact on whether or not people actually do manifest these side effects. And I'm guilty of it myself. I know this stuff. And yet I have said to the doctor, oh, could I try this drug? Because it worked really well for my friend. And I know it's silly because my friend has a whole different DNA makeup than me. And yet there is something in that. And I've also said to my GP at times, right, well, I've tried this drug in this category. Now I'll try this other one. But I'm aware that I might be predisposed to think that I'm going to get side effects again. So I say, like, I'm going to do everything I can to mitigate the nocebo effect. And
Yeah.
it's hard to do. Like,
It,
it is
yeah.
hard.
Yeah. I mean, you talked yourself into not, having those side effects. And sometimes people also talk themselves into not succeeding. And, when it comes to things like smoking cessation or, giving up a bad habit, they've already talked themselves out of it before they've even tried. And that's where things like motivational interviewing can be so helpful to try and overcome that ambivalence for change. I mean, in our practice, we have very helpful health coaches, and they use something called the patient activation measure, the PAM, which is a validated tool, and it assesses a patient's ability to manage their own health and well-being, and it captures how likely they are to act on their beliefs at the beginning. So they rate them at the start, and at the end of the coaching sessions, they then kind of reevaluate things, and it's actually shown improvements in things like their HbA1c, which is the measure of sugar levels, and their diabetic control over 2 to 3 months time. So it just shows how powerful these kinds of, I guess, internal monologues can actually be.
They are. They reshape our neurology. And so, of course, that's going to have an impact on our physiology. And I love what you just brought up there. I found recently in some studies the documented difference between when we intend to do something versus when we expect that we will be able to do something. And often we are just asking people about their intention, and we're missing a trick. We need to ask about what their intention is. For example, I intend to go to the gym. Okay, do you believe you will go to the gym is a whole other question, isn't it?
Yeah,
And
yeah,
again,
it
for
is.
me, the answers may be different sometimes. So there's a lot here to unpack, and small changes that we can make when talking to ourselves, but also then talking to our family members and our colleagues, to, if we can just ask those different questions, not, coming from a place of wanting to be most helpful.
Mm. And it's also about how we present data, isn't it? Either to
Oh,
ourselves or to others. I mean, taking a specific example of, medications which are helpful for preventing things like stroke. If I was to say, oh, this drug has got a 30% risk of bleeding, versus this has a 70% reduction in stroke risk, how a patient perceives that information is going to be so different. And actually, I have to be really mindful as a doctor to not let my biases influence a patient decision. Because if I really want a patient to take a drug, I will then say, oh, it's got a 70% chance that it's going to do good things for you. But actually, in order for a patient to make an informed decision, the way that I present the data has to be very carefully thought out so that I'm not influencing them in any way. And it's the same when you're talking to yourself, when you're having these kind of motivational chats with yourself. You've got to kind of reframe and I guess see the data in a pretty objective way, so that you're not either positively or negatively influencing your behaviors.
and I don't know that there is an answer when it comes to this side of things, because those decisions are hard to make. And I often, when I'm talking to people I perceive as experts, so in this instance, you for a health approach, I would say, what would you do if, with all this information, which can be hard for a layperson to assimilate and make a judgment call on? And it might be that then they're able to reflect back, well, I would be considering this, this, and this. So obviously everyone's circumstances are different, and side effects for one person may be more impactful than for others, possibly depending on life stage or other variables. But I often turn it back to the experts and say, what would you do in this situation? And obviously some answer, some don't.
Yeah, I think you've got to be impartial in certain situations, but I think actually giving, from my point of view, I know that I definitely would offer opinions on certain things like that because, people come to you because they trust you and you're a doctor, and how would I want to be treated myself? How would I want my pa parents or my family to be treated? I would confer that same care to my patients. I guess in the less of a specific situation, so kind of more in the working environment, Amy, that you see in the corporate world, for example. Um, yeah, how could we kind of apply that to those kind of situations then?
So, yeah, let's talk about corporates, and then I want to talk about parenting because we're
Mm.
as both being parents. Oh gosh, they have a world of beliefs that sometimes can be helpful or unhelpful, and we are more responsible, I guess, as parents for influencing beliefs in that setting. So, in the corporate world, one of the most untapped opportunities, I would say, is people's expectations. And as you alluded to, the influence of frames and outside influence, peer influence. So, taking something as seemingly straightforward as work-life balance. So I've been rewriting Make Your Brain Work recently, and when I spoke to a lot of different professionals, I had the expectation that I would be able to ditch that chapter now. I thought we would have worked out how to, balance things and work in a way that felt like we could have a full home life and a full work life. But everyone I spoke to said, no, no, we need to keep work life balance chapter in. It's still a big problem. And some were even saying it's a bigger problem since COVID than it was before. And I could go, yeah, off on a tangent, but the people's expectations and when we compare ourselves with our peers. So, for example, I run a business, you work in a high pressured, full surgery where there is always going to be more people that could do with your input. That's the nature of things. If we are comparing ourselves to someone who has a very different job and works different hours and has less pressures, then we could end up feeling like we're hard done by and that things where we work are not fair, are not right, all of the rest of it. And that has an effect. So I think our expectations are hugely influential. And then what the organization can do is actually address some of those expectations and make sure that everything follows through. So from when you're recruiting people, what you're putting out there. You can't say you get a wonderful work-life balance here and then expect people to work to 2 a.m. It doesn't follow through because then their expectations are challenged and they feel hard done by at that point potentially, and that has a negative knock-on effect. So working out what is realistic within your industry, within your company, and making sure that follows through, I think is really influential. And then the other thing is upskilling people in the impact of how these mind frames impact us, and different companies will benefit in from different packaging around those frames. So whether it's the 30%, the 70%, or whether it's things like using sporting analogies, a lot of people can relate to that and think about how we change our beliefs and how that impacts even our cardiovascular output. There's been studies on cyclists looking at what feedback they're getting through their smartwatches or more sophisticated versions in professional athletics, but what that feedback does to their brain and does to their perception of how hard they're working. So I think acknowledging everyone is a useful approach, and also combining that with realistic expectations that are communicated so that people aren't having those nasty surprises. Does that sound
Yeah,
reasonable?
yeah, absolutely. And I guess off what you've said then, it takes a little bit of personal reflection as well. So obviously as a business, you want to be reflecting on decisions that you've made, but as an individual as well. I mean, I think the example I can think of is patients who are very much gym goers, very athletic, and they're really keen on staying fit, and yet they're engaging in certain unhealthy behaviors such as binge drinking or smoking, and I guess it's about then reflecting on that as well. And I do gently challenge patients about these types of things without being condescending, of course, to kind of question why their actions are contradictory to their beliefs. And holding those contradictory beliefs, as you know, the cognitive dissonance is can be quite an obstacle for people. But unless it's
Yeah.
been kind of highlighted to them, and you've reflected on that, then you're not going to be aware of that. So it's about being honest with yourself, and organizations being honest as well about, what kind of things they've noticed, which can be quite a difficult conversation at times, can't it?
100%. And that's one of the benefits of good friends, I think, is being able to increase our self-awareness. We all have blind spots. There can be reasons for our blind spots at different times of life. Sometimes I know I've been more sensitive, and hard feedback, like, for example, do you realize you're living two separate lives and your identity is totally incongruent? You are sensitive enough as my friend to know when to introduce those kind of challenges and when not. But having good friends that will hold a light up, a mirror up, and say, what do you think about this? And are there any incongruencies? And, what identity do you want to have? And if someone's comfortable with it, obviously that's no problem. We're not talking about challenging for our sake, but we are talking about looking at an individual and thinking, have they got everything set up in their minds, in the way that they're living life, that most benefits them? And as you say, cognitive dissonance, some of these identity conflicts, they likely are registering at some level. And then by bringing it up into conscious awareness, we've got more of an opportunity to do something about it.
Absolutely. And yeah, friends will always, well, good friends will always approach this in a very non-judgmental way, non-confrontational way. Well, actually, as you say, sometimes depending upon your state, it may be more confrontational. But that's also really important, isn't it? I mean, you see this in rehabilitation programs and support groups for rehabilitation, how it can
Yeah.
be so powerful sharing all these personal experiences and having these non-judgmental conversations in that kind of safe space. That's really, going to have such an influence on our beliefs and how we then move forward in certain situations. You'll have to remind me what the term is. When it comes to that, I think deep canvassing. I think I remember reading.
Yeah,
Um,
that's right. So I looked into the deep canvassing, and the ingredients around that were the empathetic, non judgmental space holding.
mm,
And when we think about changing beliefs, if there was one thing that I would recommend universally without knowing the details of the individuals involved and the specifics of the beliefs, I would say that is the thing that you want to experiment with. Getting alongside someone, showing empathy, showing curiosity, being non judgmental, and holding a space for them to explore their beliefs. Because we tend to think of, in order to change something, it has to be, oomphy, energy, and lots of action. And actually, this approach has got a very different energy to it. We are holding a space and then allowing someone to explore. But ultimately, you can't change my beliefs. You can't change my mind about things, but you can help me to change my own mind. And this is what this research showed. And I think it's, like, from my perspective, it's still really in its infancy, but it's fascinating, the data and the approaches that have been explored through this process. So it's brilliant to highlight that one top tip for general approaches. And I guess that leads us quite nicely into children and probably how you and I parent. Hands up, I definitely know my daughter has some amazing beliefs and some approaches to life that are different to mine and that are better than mine. So I'm definitely learning from her. But there are also some things that she believes that I don't think are helpful to her. And so I want to try and help her explore whether other beliefs might be more helpful. And at the moment, I don't know whether she believes she can change her beliefs. I don't know. And I don't know the research around the ages that young people become aware, less tightly connected to their beliefs as they were with their realities. But what have you found useful from a belief change with children?
well, my son's obviously a little bit younger than your daughter, and I think, like you say, it changes depending upon their age. But I mean, I tried out some affirmation cards recently, and we've spoken, we all know about affirmations and how that can be powerful, I guess. But with a child, I wasn't quite sure how it would work. But actually, they were really simple cards. And every Sunday morning when we get up, we choose a card and it's got a lovely little cartoon on it, and it will say something like, you are beautiful on the inside and the outside, and then it'll have like a little funny picture or something with it. And then in the mornings throughout the week, I just remind him of this particular affirmation, and when he's done something which reflects that, I highlight it to him and I say, see, look. And it's I can see a change in his behavior. I think it's about instilling that inner confidence in them. And I mean, maybe we're just more aware of it as a society now. I mean, I don't remember doing this kind of stuff when I was young or having these kind of thought processes. But what we want to do is just try and equip our children for life, right? And life's busy, it's hectic, and I yeah, definitely don't always get it right. But I think just even that small thing, that small kind of activity that we do, I have seen an improvement in some of his behaviors, and it's I've seen the confidence kind of grow in him, which then is going to lead on to better things in other areas of his life, isn't it? So it's a small thing. Whether or not it's going to be sustained, I don't know, but I try my best to keep reminding him. And I thought to myself, oh, maybe I need to do the same. I mean, I don't know about manifesting and what the evidence is behind that. But yeah, I think some affirmation and positive affirmation every morning is not a bad thing for all of us, really.
No, I agree. So what I love is that you haven't just used an affirmation and then almost bounced off it. So almost just looked in the mirror and said, I'm beautiful on the inside and the out, and then left it. I think one of the really key things that you shared there was that you use it as an anchor point to reinforce when then there is evidence in his life that you can link back to that supportive belief, because that does sound like a really helpful and healthy belief to adopt. And yet many people will go through life and will sort for the evidence that's contrary to that. And we know that we can prime the brain to sort for particular things. And there was a few studies quite a while back, one of which was from UCL, which was where we met, looking at something as simple as an app. But I can't find the study now, so I don't know whether it's disappeared. But I found a couple of other studies that that reinforced some similar approaches. But basically, even just swiping on a screen for happy faces and ignoring the sad faces was shown to change people's attributional bias, so what they focused on, which dead exciting. I did try with my daughter when, a good few years ago. She found it utterly boring, so maybe not for everyone. But what you're doing is a more practical, lived example of that. You're helping to support what your son is sorting for. And that's how we structure our beliefs, isn't it? When we look for evidence that supports them, that's what layers in. And this is where in organizations, managers can have a huge impact, because what are they helping their people to sort for? Is it healthy for them, or are they just throwing up all the problems and directing attention to the challenges all the time? That is going to structure their beliefs. And what we do every day can be taking us closer to the brain that is going to be most helpful to us, or further away from it. So parents, managers, friends, we're all so influential in the shaping of ourselves and others. There are opportunities all the time to make these small tweaks. So yeah, that anchoring piece I think is really important. The manifesting question, I think those that sort of unpack what actually might be going on when we talk about this manifesting approach, it is more about what's going on in the brain and how we're priming ourselves and directing our attention to then work on things, often below conscious awareness, so that things are more likely to happen. I don't subscribe to the sort of, I'm going to manifest a Ferrari, I'm visualizing it. Oh, look, there's the Ferrari. Shucks, I know. Nobody's ever happy when I say that. But manifesting better relationships, that's very general. I would then always encourage more specificity and also reflection on, well, what's our role in that? I know one of the things I'm working on is more patience, more warmth, and thinking about the specifics of that, visualizing the more specifics of that, writing down what it would look like when. All of those things are like mental rehearsals, and we know that the brain needs to fire the neuronal pathways whether we're imagining something or whether we're doing something for real. So
Mm.
it's almost like we're exercising the brain in the way that we then will need it to repeat it. And there are some great studies looking at visualization, which links into this around small motor movements. So, for example, finger movements, doing exercises and increasing the strength of small muscle groups. I've not managed to slim down my thighs doing this visualization, but like playing the piano, shooting basketball hoops, all of those kind of exercises that are a little bit more structurally packaged and quite specific have got good evidence behind them. So I would say it can't hurt on those fronts.
Mm. Oh, shame about the thighs and shame about the Ferrari. Anyway, we'll work on those in other ways.
Exactly. Visualizing myself doing the Pilates every day will have to suffice for now. Okay, so I think from our conversation, I'm hearing it is definitely possible to change beliefs. There are lots of different approaches that we want to consider when changing beliefs. Obviously, as professionals, we've got responsibilities to evaluate when we need to be as unbiased and uninfluential as possible, knowing that that's not normally possible to the degree that would be ideal at all. Because even if you were to give both your frames of 30% chance of bleeding, 70% chance in stroke reduction, which one do you say first? Because then you've got the bias occurring of which one you've. And what happens to your face? Do you smile when you say the 70% reduction because you just can't but help but be hopeful that that's the one they'll choose? We are not blank slates, are we? We can't be completely unbiased. I don't know. I don't think. But there is definitely hope. And there's also responsibility. I think we've kind of echoed that we've all got the opportunity to positively support helpful belief development in others.
Yeah, and I think it's about going on that journey with someone, isn't it? I mean,
Yeah.
I think we've spoken about this before, really, but the power of storytelling is just, and just having those conversations, I think, is really helpful. I mean, we do use it in the NHS. We've got diabetic groups who meet up to talk about newly diagnosed diabetes, and they share their experiences and they learn about diabetes. But I think storytelling and having those conversations and going on that journey with one another, whether that be with friends, with colleagues, with your children, yeah, very impactful.
I totally agree. I think one of the most important and helpful things I've found as a parent is having other parents to talk to that have maybe children at similar ages or with similar challenges. And how that influences my beliefs is that when I'm at home and dealing with difficulties, I might choose to believe that I'm not competent enough to handle this challenge well, or I've in some way done something that's created this challenge, both of which may be true, but they also may not be true. And by having that wider influence and data input, hearing from other parents, I've got the opportunity to see whether that's the most helpful belief or whether I might choose to believe, oh, okay, lots of people are struggling with this. Maybe even it's a normal part of childhood development. And that puts a very different lens on something that could mean that I would be far more compassionate to myself and to my child and may take a different course of action. So it can be like just a small story can be incredibly impactful, can't it?
Absolutely.
And we don't even think of it as belief change or then behavior change. We think we're just having a chat.
Yeah, exactly. It's so subtle. Carry on
So
chatting.
subtle. I love it. Oh, well, Jess, thanks for sharing so many of the insights from the medical world around belief change. And I think it's great to have some of that sort of scientific awareness and validation that these are important things that we explore.
And thank you.
It's a pleasure. So, if you have enjoyed today's episode, then please share it with a friend or a colleague who might find it helpful. It's one of the best ways for us to grow and help reach more people like you that are interested in the brain. Make sure you're following us on your preferred listening or viewing platform so you are first to know when we release a new episode.